Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? Good. How many are dealing with storm stuff still that are here? Okay. Hang in there. I was talking to Alan a few minutes ago on the phone and I said, well, we've had flooding, a natural gas explosion, and now a mini twister in our backyard. So I walked out the door and I said to my wife, well, another day, another disaster. Yeah, I was at the briefing yesterday for the over CU, and some may be up to a week, but we'll have, if you want to join in, we'll have Larry give an update at our briefing here at 9:15. So anyway, Alan and I are excited to talk to you about the NACo trip that we took, and I'm sure we'll tell some funny stories as well. We saved the county some money and took the new jail transport van. There'll be some interesting things. So Alan is a first-time attendee, and Cheryl also went, Cheryl Dawson-Spalding, but she had a meeting this morning, so she apologizes that she could not share her experience as well. So I thought maybe to start off, I'll just tell you a little bit, but I want Alan to kind of give you that first-timer's a perspective of NACo. So there are 3,069 counties, and the National Association of Counties is really, it serves multiple purposes. The first is to bring counties together so we can share best practices. And we also come up with policy initiatives that we come together on. There's a process by which we adopt those, and we do that at the annual meeting, which is what we just went to. And then we lobby Congress for those policy initiatives. So that was part of what we worked on. And then I serve on the board for the state. And do I need to turn it around? Thank you. There are folks very possibly listening, maybe even later, who want to watch the recording. So I serve on the board representing Missouri and the Missouri Association of Counties, and that's one of our major board meetings. So part of the reason we wanted more attendees is I spend a lot of time in those board meetings and miss out on a lot of the content. And then we have 4 board meetings a year. So I'll share some of the policy initiatives, but Alan, why don't you kind of talk about some of the breakout sessions and the things that you experienced as a first-time attendee?
Okay. Yeah, I'll say it was a little bit overwhelming. I think we've probably all been to conferences from time to time, but this was overwhelming. If for no other reason, you had 3,000 counties, and they all have different perspectives and different interests. And so I'll give the NACo folks, the staff folks, a kudos for organization, because when you have something of that magnitude being organized is amazing. And this is just, there are 26 pages. I brought this because I like show and tell. 26 pages of meetings you can attend throughout the 4 days. So it is a little overwhelming, like, wow, which ones do I go to? Some of these are by invitation only, and some are general topics. So for Cheryl, I'll speak on behalf of Cheryl and I, we were both a little overwhelmed, like, okay, which one do we go to? What makes the most sense for what we have an interest in as far as Greene County? And some are very specific. And as Bob said, in some cases, there are what I call like a mini session in the very large conference room. It's a very short session, because some of these, in fact, the first one we went to, I think the steering committee that Bob's a member of, it started at 9 or 9:30 and went to 4:30. So it was an all-day session, whereas some of the minis on the conference room floor are shorter half-hour sessions, so it can be very brief and very interesting. And it's everything from A to Z. If there's anything that you have an interest in as far as what's going on in the nation or at the political level, NACo will cover all of that. So it was very informative. It was very overwhelming just because of all the options and where do we go and what do we do and what we listen to. And of course you have, I'll just say this from a political perspective, you have every opinion under the sun, some of which you agree with and some of which you don't, but it's always interesting to hear other perspectives and how people arrived at those perspectives. So it was, as I said, very informative, but very overwhelming at the same time.
Well, I'll just add to that. The perspectives are different. And of course, every state and their laws are different. So counties operate differently. Some places don't have counties. So you'll have a borough like in Alaska, or you'll have a parish like in Louisiana. Connecticut doesn't send anybody because they have counties, but there's no county government. They did away with it years ago. So, yeah. Yeah, and so it's quite in serious. It is kind of a boo because the towns govern, and where they don't, the state does it. So it's quite a different system. But we do have a lot of perspectives, and then also size of county. And I think Alan stepped into both conferences, which is what I've done in the past. There's the large urban county caucus and there's the rural action caucus. And those really are like 50,000 and under. And some of the counties will have 1,000 people and they're 6 times the size of Greene County land wise. And then you'll have the large ones that are 1 million and over. We fit really between those two groups. So I've bounced into both of those and found some commonality with both groups. So we're in a sweet spot as far as being able to glean ideas and information. The other thing that occurs at that conference is there are vendors who serve counties that do come and present. And then NACo has a series of businesses that they have spun off because they're perhaps in a sector isn't exactly what a county or group of counties needs. So that was called the NACo Financial Services Center, which person looking at that name thinks it has to do with banking. So it really didn't describe that. So they are rolling out, first of all, they're rolling out a new website in September. And I know many of our office holders and department heads utilize the services on the website. So that will be new. And then they are also rolling out a new set of businesses under the name of NACo Edge. So it will be everything from insurance to employee benefits to financial offerings, vendors for, everything that we can think of. In fact, when we had the briefing last week about cybersecurity, I mentioned to our IS folks, there's now an option on that. So we can take a look at those and see if that benefits us. The intention is to save counties money and return some of that to the bottom line for counties. So one, for example, was a company called 3+1, which does a lot of, I'll call it leveraging to get banking costs lower, and they really use the aggregate. They use the aggregate number of counties, and they leverage the size and the populations for benefit for all the counties. So that was good. You want to talk about maybe some of the specific breakouts? I did get to a few, and I'll mention one, but go ahead.
Again, the one that the all day that I referred to, I was looking at this, I tried to highlight that, was the Finance, Pensions, and Intergovernmental Affairs Policy Steering Committee, of which Bob is a member, that talked about topics on all those. And one thing I learned is steering committees can pass resolutions that go to the entire membership or the organization. And one thing I learned is as an elected official, you're lobbied day in and day out. And there are some organizations that are more powerful, maybe have a stronger or louder voice than others. And I did not realize, but in hindsight, it makes sense that the counties, 3,000 counties, carry a lot of weight in Washington, D.C. So it's important that counties like Greene County, which are kind of in the middle, are part of that organization. So their policies or recommendations that are presented at the steering committee that can go to the full membership and then will be used as a point to lobby Congress on. But one, I'll just pull one that Bob talked about, the large urban county caucus business meeting. And as you can imagine, there are some very, very large counties, both in California and New York, that are members of this. And again, that's where those different perspectives come from between California and Missouri. But they were talking about issues that are important to the large counties, obviously dealing with Washington, D.C. And in this case, the topics that were covered were homelessness and housing, income equality, and economic development, because all those can impact really every county, some more than others in the U.S. And one thing that I did not go to that I wish I would have, the city of Austin, I don't see it's in here someplace. They, as you can imagine, and if you read the news, are dealing with a fairly large homeless population. And they have actually created a 51-acre site where they have what I'll call mini homes for homeless. And we were actually given the opportunity to tour that. And in hindsight, I wish I would have gone on that. Not that my office deals with that, but as we know, for Greene County, homelessness is an issue. And what are the options? How can it be addressed? But as Bob says, it gives other counties the opportunity to see, what are you doing here in Travis County, which is where Austin is located. And there may be some good ideas that we can bring back and share either with other office holders at the county level or even the city level to try to make changes, positive changes for the citizens of Greene County.
So I'll kind of tag on to that. One of the breakout sessions that I went to, actually it wasn't a breakout session, it was one of the main business events where they spoke to the general membership. The supervisor from Los Angeles County brought a guest who was a psychiatrist and spoke to the general membership about the history of mental health in this country. It was extremely eye-opening, and it shined a light on a lot of what we're dealing with here, but it's all over the country. And I'll try to condense this down because this was about a 30-minute thing over lunch. And he spoke very fast, but he gave the history from the 1950s to today on what we have done with mental health, specifically closing the mental hospitals and not treating mental health the way we treat other health issues. Specifically, emptying the mental hospitals and certain diseases, and he gave all the examples, were no longer socially acceptable to call a disease and no longer socially acceptable to hospitalize people for, unless it's an acceptable mutation of a mental disorder, then it's okay. And so his point was, we have flooded the nursing homes, the jails, and the streets with people that really need mental health care. We see that, we know that. Now, what do we do about that? And that was kind of his synopsis of the problem, and trying to get the counties to not only work on that in Washington, because it's going to take some change as far as what is treatable, what is socially acceptable to be treated, and then, of course, everything from Medicare to Medicaid and how that impacts states and counties. So it was really eye-opening. It made a lot of sense, and a lot of people have played into that. Everything from Hollywood, he gave examples, to just social mores. And what is acceptable to say that's a mental health disorder. But he was speaking simply as a psychiatrist. And he seemed rather
passionate.
Yes, he certainly was. We also heard from Joan London, who spoke at one of the luncheons, and I thought she did an incredible job. She was talking about really just the civil discourse in the country. And she was talking about social media and how we seem to be on both sides of the political spectrum, so angry, and yet the changes. And she wasn't speaking from she was careful to kind of conceal her own personal perspective. But she spoke about just the changes, if you will, throughout the last 20 years, everything from social media to the advent of cable news and also entertainment news, from both political perspectives, where it used to be that the journalist at least would try to conceal their political perspective. That was really, I thought she did a pretty good job. It was, she came down to just talking about the attitude of individuals and the level of anxiety and anger in the country. I thought that was very good.
Yeah, it did.
Oops.
First time through, not me. Again, very informative and a lot of topics, things that I, again, never having been, didn't realize just the overwhelming level of opportunity to become informed and educated on things that don't necessarily apply to this office, but certainly apply to us as residents of Greene County. So it was a worthwhile trip. We got all sorts of interesting looks in our transport vehicle. I thought you would have sent a picture to share, but not. Whenever you open up the sliding door, and it's clearly marked Greene County Sheriff Prisoner Transport Van, and people start piling out, people around are taking notice of what's going on.
Angie was helping us locate a vehicle because all the rental companies were booked up, and the one at Highway was a little too small. We were going to have more people going, and the sheriff's office had the van, but they had not converted it to prisoner transport. And so Dean was working on that. He said, "We've got it." I said, "Is there any way you could get the lettering on that before we go?" I thought it would be a unique experience. And sure enough, it certainly raised the profile of Greene County, Missouri, as we drove through the streets of Austin and dropped people off at their hotel and went back. And so that was memorable. I was going to mention too, let's see, we're talking about insurance. Oh, the High Performance Leadership Academy. How many have participated in that? Anybody in here? Okay. That's another service of NACo, and they have also extended the special pricing that they had related to this conference. So we may look at that again and continue working on that. It's, again, the goal is to give value and services back to counties who are members, but we're careful to make the services that are on the website available to all counties, whether they have paid for a membership or not. And I think that really sets us apart from some other organizations. So it is very, citizen focused, because they want to serve everyone across the country. And like Alan was saying, the things that we take before Congress for policy initiatives, because of the process, they really hash down into what's practical. They're not partisan driven. Now, there's a lot of opinions. I mean, for the first time in the 4 years that I've gone, I signed on to a resolution which was presented in February, the last board meeting of the legislative conference in Washington. And I've always been very concerned about the growing divide between the receipts of the federal government and the expenditures of the federal government. And of course, it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to figure out that is at least one of the drivers of inflation. As we spend more, we create electronic money. And we've seen that through kind of post-pandemic with the funds that have been out there. So I thought, it wasn't just a resolution calling for a balanced budget. It called for a reduction in federal spending so that we could eventually balance the budget. So in February, that had extensive debate, and there was a motion to not have debate on it and set it aside, which it came down to a tie vote, and that was set at, actually, it was a tie vote of those present, and then the ones that were on virtually caused it to actually be set aside. So it was very controversial, and it very much split the board. But we don't pass membership resolutions there. We can do it would make it a temporary resolution until the membership met in the summer. So that resolution was presented again. It was quite different because it commended the current administration for working with Congress to keep the government running here a few months ago and making compromising on spending and those other things and keeping the government operational. So anyway, long story short, I signed on to that resolution, and it came through, sponsored by a commissioner out of Colorado. It came through the steering committee that I serve on, which is the one Alan was mentioning, the pensions and intergovernmental affairs. And we had extensive debate. Anyway, it failed narrowly, but it failed to move forward to the full membership. And so, just to give you an example, that might have had better success if it didn't specifically mention spending reduction, but it called for a balanced budget, because some of the folks felt like some of the tax cuts that had been passed by the previous administration should be rescinded. So we do get into some of those debates, but generally, because of that filter, what comes out on the other side are pretty nonpartisan policy resolutions that just benefit the operation of counties. One, for example, which has gotten considerable discussion. One of the attendees that rode with us serves as a county clerk up on the Iowa and Illinois line. So she drove to Springfield and went down, and she's been working on essentially federal money that's sent to states for distribution into counties for specific things, like pick one, broadband, for example. The states across the board are holding on to those funds. I'm not saying broadband specifically, but there's any number of things, but that's one where this could be an issue. They hold on to those funds and use them for cash flow, and then often the funds either don't get to the counties or they're not used, they're returned to the feds. And so one of the things that we've been lobbying for, and quite successfully kind of through the pandemic and post-pandemic, is if you want the funds spent, fund counties directly. And at the legislative conference in February, we had Speaker Pelosi who came and just discussed that. And it's very interesting to see people in person without the filter of the news media. She was really funny. I mean, she was really entertaining to listen to. We might disagree on policy, but you see the human side of people. And that kind of took me back to what Joan London's discussion about the media was. So it was just an interesting observation. Anything else?
That covers the waterfront for me.
Okay. Questions? Yes.
Is there a recording of the psychiatrist?
I think so. I think there is actually. And if you go on the NACo website, I think they have a streaming section and or conference highlights. You might take a look, and if you can't find it, you might shoot me an email and I'll see if I know I've got a contact that could probably get it for us, because they recorded everything up there. I just don't know that it would be on the website. But yeah, take a look and then send me an email if you can't find it on there. And I'll get somebody to find it for us. Good question. Somebody in the back? Oh, good question. Okay. Yeah. Good question. I'm sorry. I thought somebody was running a generator out there. That's what I've been hearing.
collecting. And how is that?
I'm really glad you asked that question. Let me repeat it. And I didn't really think it was a generator, but that's what's been on my mind. So her question was the more on a state level, the legislature passed at the last minute Senate Bill 190, which has been signed into law. The governor did sign that bill. It authorizes a tax credit at the county level, if it's approved by the commission or a vote of the people, for property tax. So let me say two things. First of all, the commission will approve that. We cannot approve it until August the 28th, but I'm confident that we will approve that. There are some jurisdictions who have already taken a vote to not pass it. So then that process for petition and a voter approval would take place if there are, I think it's 5% of the registered voters who voted in the last presidential election. So the rest of your question was, where are we going to get the money to do that and how's it going to work? Well, Alan, how is that going to work?
That is the $64,000 question.
Yeah. So let me talk about the problems with the legislation. So I was up there 16 years, and the one thing I learned over and over again is it's very easy to have unintended consequences because they always happen. So you have to anticipate what those are, figure them out before, so that your language is specific enough that you answer those questions. So in a nutshell, these are the problems that I see. First of all, and KY3 is going to sit down with me and kind of redo their story because they erroneously said everybody over 65 gets this credit. Nowhere in that bill is there an age line. It's not for seniors. It's purported to be for seniors. The ballot language, if citizens call for it to be on the ballot language says, shall a property tax credit be issued for seniors? But the way they did it for qualification is if someone is eligible for Social Security. Well, that's not just seniors, because people on Social Security disability who be 18 also get Social Security. Then they have to also own property in the county. Now, not everyone who gets Social Security will be eligible, and also not everyone who is a senior gets Social Security. So if you don't pay into it, you don't qualify, you're not eligible. So we're going to have seniors coming to us wanting this credit, and they won't qualify. If they get railroad retirement, civil service, public school retirement, they don't pay into it. They don't get it. Ministers, and there are others. So those are the top line issues. The other issue is when it says when they're eligible. So the credit starts August the 28th, but maybe they were eligible for Social Security 10 years ago. The bill doesn't really address when we're supposed to issue the credit from what day. The day the bill began, the day they came in with their eligibility statement, which we're going to have to do because the federal government's not going to share that data with us. And we may have software issues. Alan has been appointed by the Missouri Association of Counties president to lead a task force with fellow office holders to try to figure this stuff out before the legislature comes back, because we don't have any guidance.
And that's the biggest challenge from our perspective is the Collectors Association. We have talked about this numerous times because of the lack of clarity in the bill. There are so many things that are not defined, and there's so many different opinions. And I'll give you one. For example, Bob talked about SSDI. When I read the bill, that you don't qualify for the bill if you're on SSDI, but you don't qualify for Social Security, because those are two separate programs. So there are legitimate differences of opinion, and that needs to be clarified. The other issue is retroactivity. I say when I was in the House, we never passed a tax credit that's retroactive. It starts the day the bill becomes law, but the bill is silent. It does not clarify that. So there'll be every opinion under the sun on how it should be implemented. And between the 114 counties, another major concern is the counties will implement it differently. And that's a problem. So there are just a raft of issues that have not been clarified and not been answered. And as Bob talked about, part of this MAC committee is to request and to assist our esteemed legislators to pass a fix to Senate Bill 190. So every county and every collector and every commissioner and every assessor knows how this process is supposed to work. So
Additionally, are we okay on time still? We're out of time. Okay. If anybody wants to talk more about that, let me know. There will be lawsuits.
guaranteed. That you can take to the bank.
But the money's not going to come out of our general revenue, just to answer that. It's funds that won't be collected and won't go to the schools, libraries, and parks. So thank you all so much. Appreciate it. And it is good to be home.